In this video, I'm going to be exploring the topic of displaying the roof in the floor plan view. So for this particular roof that we have over here, if I just open up level 2, for example, level 2 is the one where the roof is located at. So if I just open that up, it's going to display that roof and it's going to look like this. So it's like a roof view or something like that, so it's perfectly fine for that. Now something to keep in mind is if you have a roof that looks like this, or if you want to use your roof level in order to display your roof, you probably don't want that roof to be cut just like this one is over here. So you can change that, and what you need to do is just raise the cut plane for your floor plan. So basically the floor plan usually cuts your level at 1 meter or 1.2 meters, and here it's basically cutting off that top part of the roof. So if you want to display the whole roof, you can simply just make sure that nothing is selected in the view. That means that in the properties panel only the view properties are displayed, and then here you just need to scroll down until you find the extents, and under extents we have the view range settings. Now previously in this course we have used this in order to kind of extend the bottom here to unlimited and the view depth as well, but in this case we're just going to be changing the cut plane. So for example, let's move this out of the way a little bit, and then here, as you can see, the cut plane is at 1200 millimeters or 1.2 meters, and that's the Revit default. But if I just change that to 2000 millimeters or 2 meters and hit apply, as you can see, it's still cutting the roof, but very slightly. So that means that maybe 2400 millimeters. Okay, so as you can see, we got that little error message. That basically means that the cut plane cannot go above the top plane. So we have to increase the top plane to, let's go with 2500, and then the cut plane is at 2400, and if we just hit apply, and OK, now as you can see, we can see the whole roof, which is exactly what we want to have. Now moving forward, let's say you want to display that same roof, but also here in level 1. In some cases you want to display the roof not only because you want to see what the roof is even in the floor plan view, but also it makes sense when you have a roof that has an overhang. It makes sense to show in level 1 where that overhang is, so you know up to what point you can kind of have cover from the rain and so on here around the building. So it does make sense to display that roof here in the level 1 floor plan. So let's explore how to do that. Now for that, again, we're going to be playing a little bit with the view settings. So again, just make sure that nothing is selected in the view, and then you want to go here to the properties panel, scroll up a little bit, and here we have the underlay settings. Now this allows you to basically underlay a different plan. So for that you can underlay the plan above, so you can just go here to level 2, and then that is going to display the roof. And now keep in mind that if you have a lot of additional elements around this roof, this might look terrible, so just keep that in mind, because you're going to have so many different elements displaying, but usually if it's just the roof, then it's going to look like this and it's going to be perfectly fine. So what you can do then is once you have shown the roof, it's still perhaps not something that you want to show like this. So what they like to do is take this a step further, and then go again here into the properties, and then let's see the visibility graphics overrides, go into edit, and then what you can simply do is scroll down and find roofs. Let's see, here we go, roofs, expand that menu, and here we have the common edges, or you can simply go here to regular roofs, and then just for the projection for lines, override that and change that into something like dashed lines, like this, for example, and then click OK. Apply, OK, and now that same roof will display with dashed lines. But again, as I said, keep in mind that if you go here into level 2, and then if we decide to place some elements, like for example this desk here, when we go here into level 1, that desk will be displaying as well. So if this is something that you want to avoid, the only other solution would be to turn on the here the underlay settings for a moment. Then you can go into the Annotate tab and use detail lines. So I would just switch the detail lines to something like the hidden line or something like that, or perhaps the overhead line that's perhaps fits the best. And then you can, for example, use just the pick lines and then just pick out the lines that you want to represent like this. If you just want to represent perhaps the just the overhang of the roof, hit the escape key a couple of times, and then you can go back here into the properties panel and just make sure to change the underlay settings for base level to none. Hit apply, and then your floor plan will look like this. But keep in mind that these lines will still be there as just annotation elements. They're not model elements, so just make sure to keep that in mind. In this video, we're going to be talking about roof patterns in Revit. So here we have that same roof from the previous video, and let's say we want to define this as a roof when it comes to material and so on. So when you go here and turn the visual style to realistic, it's going to look like this. And then of course we can select the roof and change its material just by going here into the properties, then going into edit type, finding the structure, and then editing the structure. And under material here by category basically means that it's just using the default category or roof category material, but you can select or click there, and then you have this little builder button, the one with 3 dots, and when you click on that, it's going to open up the material library. Now, one of the options here is going to be the roofing tile. So if I just double click here, just to apply that roofing tile, and then click OK, and then click apply, OK again, you're going to notice that here, we have that roofing tile applied to our roof. Now you can notice that it applies to this part of the roof as well. You can obviously hide that using fascia, or usually not the whole roof is going to be a roof tile, only the the top layer. So this issue, you wouldn't have that there. But even if we apply this roof material, and then if I just go here to the visual styles and bring this to hidden line, even though the material is applied, we still don't really have any pattern over this, just like that. Now, I actually like to have some sort of a pattern indicating the roof, just because I think the whole project looks nicer in hidden line view. So what I usually like to do is to select the roof, go into edit type, and then find, of course, the structure, expand that structure, or go into edit the structure, and here in the structure, let's go to material and let's edit that. And here under graphics, we have some patterns. So we have some surface patterns and also some cut patterns. So for surface patterns, what I like to do is to go to foreground, so that's the one that's kind of on top, and there for the pattern I like to click here, and you're going to get the fill patterns menu. Now the fill patterns menu in Revit is divided into drafting patterns and model patterns. Now the main difference between these two types of patterns is the fact that drafting patterns are designed to be for drafting. So for example, if you have some view that's in 1:100 scale, then in that case, for example, the pattern, the distance here, for example, for this crosshatch is 1.5 millimeters. But then if you decide to print it at a different scale, like 1:50, the distance between these crosshatches is still going to stay 1.5 millimeters, because it's for drafting. It's supposed to correspond with the dimension of the paper and the scale. Now, on the other hand, model patterns are, model patterns. They're designed to kind of stay in place with the actual model. So they're kind of designed to be actual spacing. So here you can see that this is 600 by 600 millimeter and so on. So the sizes are much larger. So these are kind of real numbers. And then for drafting, these are kind of printing numbers. So what you want to do, or printing dimensions. So what you want to do is go with the model pattern, and then what I like to do is find vertical lines. Now let's see here. We have some horizontal ones, but we don't seem to have any vertical lines. And also, unfortunately, at least with this version of Revit, you don't really get any shingles here, which is too bad. We get some herringbone, parquet, wood board, brick and so on, but no roofing, which is yeah, it's kind of a downer. You can use the block, and it can work with some types of roofs or even the squares, but unfortunately no roof tile. So anyways, what I like to do is find the 100 millimeter horizontal one. And then what I like to do here is go to this little duplicate fill pattern button. And then when I click on that, it's going to allow me to, well, duplicate that. So I'm just going to call this one the 100 millimeter vertical, just like this. And then here we have the parallel lines. We want to keep the parallel lines, and then we also want to keep the line angle, and or actually change the line angle. It's currently 0, and we just want to up that to 90 degrees, making these vertical. And then for line spacing, let's just leave that at 100 to test it out, and then you can play around with that later on. So once you have made this change, you can OK out of that. As you can see here, we have a brand new model fill pattern type, and then we can OK out of that. As you can see here, now that is applied. And also here you can play around with the color. So the lines are not defined by color, by the pattern, but by the color here. So I don't like to have black color because, or black as color, just because it might be a bit too dark. So I like to go with this shade of gray here, and then click OK. So as you can see, it's just going to apply that shade here to these lines, which is perfect. And then you can just click apply, and then OK. OK out of that, apply, OK, here we go. And then if you zoom in, you can see that now we have those lines. And as you can see, because they're kind of gray, they look kind of nice. They're just giving a little bit more shade to that roof, and I really think that's that kind of brings into the design, makes it look nicer and so on. So if you want to keep it, you can keep this. I think it does look really good. In this video, we're going to be covering the topic of graphics for flat roofs in Revit. So here, as you can see, we have just a simple rectangle building with a flat roof. Now, as we explored in the chapter that was dedicated to flat roofs aren't really flat. Well, of course, they do have to have some sort of a small slope in order to, well, drain the water. You don't want to have pools of water when it rains on top of your building, so that's kind of obvious. Now when we do that, when we go through that process, and let's go through it right now just by selecting this flat roof and then going here to the shape editing tools and adding a point. So I'm just going to arbitrarily place a point here somewhere in the center, go to the modify tool, then select this again. Now in order to shape this roof, let's go to modify sub-elements and then select that, and now we can change that maybe minus 100 millimeters or something like that, and then we can go back to modify, and this is the roof that we get. So obviously this is showing us that these lines are showing us that the roof has now been kind of separated into 4 individual sloping panels, which are kind of sloping towards the inside, and then the drain could be placed over here. Now this is perfectly okay to have, but in some cases it might be a little too many lines when it comes to presentations. So sometimes you don't want to present these basically these lines here that are kind of showing off the contour or the shape of the flat roof. In some cases you just don't want to show that. Maybe it's a bit too much. You want to have a simple representation. You don't want to confuse perhaps a client that's not really doesn't know that much about architecture or something like that. So it's a good idea to get rid of these. Now there are a couple of approaches. One that is maybe quicker when you have a small building like this, but I do not prefer it, but I'm going to show it to you anyways because I feel like it's my job to teach you what's possible and what's perhaps better, but in the end it's up to you to choose. So the first approach would be to go here to the Modify tab, and then on the Modify tab, on the View panel, we have the Line Work tool. Now, what the Line Work tool allows you to do is to, well, change existing lines and change their line style. And if I expand this menu, one of the options that we have here are invisible lines. So if I select the invisible lines and then go, and as you can see, we can highlight these existing lines, and we can actually click on them, and it's basically going to make them, well, invisible. So if I hit the escape key a couple of times, as you can see, it's gone. It still has that slope, and if we go to modify sub-elements, it's still going to report that, but it's just not going to show those lines because, well, they're going to be invisible. Now, this is something that I do not prefer, so let me go back a few steps. There we go. So we're back to back to where we started from. And the second approach, the one that might be a lot better, and that is to make a change when it comes to the visibility graphics override for the entire project. And that can simply be done by going here to the properties, visibility graphics overrides, go into edit, and then here search for, and let's try to find that. So let's search for roofs, expand the roof category, and one of the options that we have is interior edges. So for each element in Revit, we have the exterior edges. In this case, that's the kind of the boundary of the roof, but also we have the interior edges, which are these lines in the middle. So if I just go here to interior edges and uncheck that and hit apply, as you can see, these will disappear. Also, you can make a small override here. So for example, we can keep that, but we can go here to lines, so projection surface lines, override, and then for example, I can override the color to be gray or even this light gray. Click OK, OK, apply, OK, and now as you can see, we have a light gray lines for that. So it may be a nicer way to represent these types of lines when it comes to flat roofs in Revit. In this video, we're going to be talking about annotation in regards to Revit roofs. So here we have a couple of roofs. We have one classic kind of sloped roof. It's a 30-degree slope. And then here on the other side, we have a flat roof, but as you can see, from this roof when I selected with the shape editing tools, we have modified it a little bit just to include just a little bit of slope, because as I have mentioned numerous times in this course, you do have to have some sort of slope even on a flat roof, and it makes sense to document that when it comes to annotation and annotating. So that's why I included that for this video. So what we're going to be exploring are some of the tools that Revit has on offer when it comes to annotating roofs and how to use those tools in the proper fashion. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go to the roof level. In this case, that's level 2, and we have already set that up previously in this chapter, so I'm not going to go over that. As you can see, the floor plan is well above the roof, so it's not cutting through this sloped roof. That's really important. Again, go through the chapter again, please, if you haven't covered that part yet. Anyways, now it's time to annotate this roof, or actually both of these. So what you want to do is go here to the Annotate tab on the ribbon, and there we have all of the annotation tools. Now the first one that I would like to cover is going to be the Spot Elevation tool. It's here under Dimensions, Spot Elevation, EL is the shortcut. So when you start this tool, it allows you to basically select, or in this case highlight first, one of the edges or points that we have on our roofs. So let's come here to this part of the roof here, the kind of the overhang. You click once here, you can drag it out. I like to go at 45 degrees. As you can see, it's going to snap to that. It's going to snap to every 45 degrees. So horizontal, 45, vertical, and so on. So I like to go like this at 45 when it snaps. Click once, then you kind of pull it out. And when you go past this point, as you can see, it kind of goes a little bit past that little elbow. I like to go past that just a little bit. Click once again, and there we go. So it's, let me just hit the escape key a couple of times. So it's basically reporting the height or the elevation at this line over here. Now let's go back here to Spot Elevation. I like to put one on the top of the roof, just like that. Perhaps one here, one here, maybe one over here. Here as well, and so on. So feel free to place as many of these as are necessary when it comes to your roofs. And of course, for these sloped lines, as you can see, as you go up the line, it's going to report the kind of the difference in height, and the same thing goes for your roof here. So you can basically place this anywhere where you want, and it is going to report that value. And if you move it around, as you can see, the numbers change. But I do not suggest to place it anywhere per se. It makes sense to place it at important points, like the kind of the lowest point and the highest point, and this one here. But anything above that might not be really necessary for your roof, or in this case the sloped roof. Now let me just go to that spot elevation again. Let's move over here to the flat roof. So again, as you can see, it's going to change because even though this is a flat roof, it does have a little bit of slope. So you can perhaps just place one here in the middle, just giving you the lowest point, and then I like to go here to the top of this point. So this is kind of the highest point. I like to go here on the top of the little wall that goes above, just like that. And this might be enough for a regular flat roof. Of course, if it's a bit more complex, you are going to include a few more of these spot elevations, but this is probably fine for this particular case. Let me then just hit the escape key a couple of times. Now, it also makes sense to make some perhaps modifications to these elevation families. So if you select them, as you can see here, it's going to report as spot elevation category, and you do have the ability to edit the type. So if I just open up edit type here, as you can see, we have some options to change. So for example, one is rotate with component. So if we apply that, as you can see, it only rotated this one, and I don't think that's necessary. So let's uncheck that and then hit apply again. Moving forward, here we have the arrow that you can use, so feel free to change that. I sometimes like to place a dot or something like that, but let's leave it as is. We can change the color, we can change the symbol, but I actually prefer this one. It kind of makes most sense. Below that, we have the text parameters, so we can play around with that. These are kind of obvious and straightforward. I tend to change the text size to 2 millimeters and then the text offset to half to half a millimeter, yeah. Or maybe let's go with, yeah, let's try half a millimeter and see what happens. Yeah, that's much better. So I like to make some changes to this because I feel like the text is usually way too large. Also here we have the opaque background. That's kind of helpful, especially when you have messy floor plans or roof plans. And then when it comes to units, here by default it's going to be set to use project settings, and in this case the project settings are set to millimeters. And something that I would recommend when it comes to basically choosing the units to use would be to model your Revit projects using the units you feel most comfortable with. It can be millimeters, centimeters, meters, or if you're using the imperial system, then pick out one of those. But when it comes to dimensioning, usually that should correspond with what's the code for those final prints. So I like to uncheck use project settings here. And then, for example, in my country, these spot elevations are supposed to be in meters. Also, let's add a couple of decimal places here. We have the ability to do that. And also, I like to add a symbol. And finally, one more thing is we have this show plus for positive values, and I like to check that as well. And now if I just click OK and then apply, it's going to appear like this. So let me just click OK to kind of exit out of this. And as you can see, now it's basically going to report that here we have plus 4.12 meters. And I prefer that to be kind of the display when it comes to these dimensions. And as you can see, when you select the dimension, you can move the text, and also you can move this little elbow. You can move the dimension like this to the other side, perhaps. This looks kind of odd. So let's move it back, and so on. And you can move it like this, kind of slide it alongside that line. So those are just some of the modifications that I personally like to make when it comes to these spot elevations. Moving forward, the next one that I prefer to use when it comes to these roofs is going to be the spot slope. So just like spot elevation, spot slope does, well, just as it sounds, it reports the slope. So you basically click there, and then you kind of come in here, and as you can see, it's going to report the slope. So we can place one here, as you can see, it flips around, one here, one there, and just so on. And let's go here as well. So as you can see, we can place it on all 4 sides of this flat roof, and then hit the escape key a couple of times. So that's basically how it works. You just come to a sloped surface and it's going to report that slope. It works with roofs, but also it works with everything else. So if you have some sort of a ramp or something like that, it is going to work for that as well. Now, one thing that I do like to change when it comes to these, and let's just select them and go into edit type. But first, let's zoom in a little bit, perhaps. Oops, edit type. Just like these spot elevations, I like to make some changes. For example, the leader line length, which is this line here, I like to drop that down to at least 20 millimeters because this is kind of silly. It's way too long. So something like this, I think it looks a bit better. Even 15 would work for me personally, but feel free to set it up to whatever you feel like should be there. Next, the text size. Again, as I said previously, I like to change that to 2 millimeters and the offset to 0.5. Hit apply. There we go. The text is now smaller and closer to the line. And then finally, the next change is going to be the units format. So again, here it's not using the project settings just by default, but I prefer to use decimal degrees with a couple of decimal places and also showing the unit symbol. And let me just check OK and then apply. And as you can see here, when you use degrees, it doesn't make sense to have the arrow this long. So let's actually just drop this down to 15 and hit apply. There we go. I feel like this is way more elegant like this than if we were to have that long line. And as you can see here, we have that smaller slope, and on this side we have that, of course, 30-degree slope as the roof is set up. So just using these dimensions, you can report or document a lot of necessary information for your roof plans, which I think is really important.